Welcome. Thank you for joining this Zoom for a discussion of 3 pathways to 30 by 30, specifically 1, 3, and 4. My name is Melanie Schlotterbeck, and I will be moderating this session today for Friends of Harbors, Beaches, and Parks. You'll see we are in webinar format on the Zoom platform. This means the icons at the bottom of the screen may be a little bit different than you normally see. Today's content is being live simulcast into Spanish, and now our interpreter will translate this introduction before being moved into the Spanish audio channel.
Bienvenidos, gracias por acompañarnos hoy en este Zoom para una discusión sobre 3 estrategias hacia 30 por 30, específicamente la estrategia número 1, número 3 y número 4. Mi nombre es Melanie Schlotterbeck y hoy moderaré esta sesión para amigos de puertos, playas y parques. Verá que estamos en formato de seminario web en la plataforma Zoom. Esto significa que los iconos en la parte inferior pueden ser un poco diferentes de lo que normalmente ve. El contenido de hoy se transmite en vivo simultáneamente en español y ahora nuestra intérprete traducirá esta introducción antes de pasarla al canal de audio en español.
Every slide has yellow text to match the English version of content. Oops, you're muted, Mercedes.
Yes, sorry about that. Perdón por eso. Cada diapositiva tiene texto amarillo para que coincida con la versión en inglés del contenido.
And should you need interpretation services, please click on the globe icon and select Spanish.
Si necesita servicios de interpretación, haga clic en el icono del globo terráqueo y seleccione español.
Should you need assistance with closed captioning, that is offered as well. Simply click the Show Captions icon. During today's presentation, we will be accepting questions via the Q&A icon. If you click it, you have the option to ask questions by typing into the box and then selecting to be anonymous or not, and clicking the send arrow on the bottom right. Finally, limited interactions will occur during the Zoom in the chat, as it is only being used to pass important information on to our participants. If you need to send something other than a question to us, click on the chat icon, type your message, and click send. Today's event is being recorded and will be posted to the Friends of Harbors, Beaches, and Parks YouTube channel. If you miss any portion, need to see something again, or registered and couldn't make it, this entire workshop will be available online. And now that we have the basics out of the way, let me acknowledge that the state of California exists on occupied territory of over 110 federally recognized and over 70 non-federally recognized tribes. These lands have been stewarded by Native nations since time immemorial. These lands and waters have significance to the indigenous people of California. Friends of Harbors, Beaches, and Parks work is focused on the ancestral homelands of the Ahachiman, Juanino, and Tongva Gabrielino people. We pay respect to the indigenous people whose land was forcibly colonized and recognize the importance of the tribal relationship to the land, past, present, and future. Actions you can take to curb cultural erasure include reading about local tribes, donating to tribally led organizations, and engaging with tribes in your work. Today's workshop is brought to you by the nonprofit Friends of Harbors, Beaches, and Parks, or FHBP for short, and we work to protect the natural lands, waterways, and beaches of Orange County, California. We are grateful for grant funding that allows these workshops to be made available. The FHBP team working on this webinar includes myself as the panel moderator. We also have Mercedes Merlot, our interpreter, and Giovanni DeFranco, who is staffing the chat and Q&A. This series is in partnership with the Power in Nature Coalition, which coordinates the grassroots efforts for 30 by 30. If you've not heard of 30 by 30's initiative, let me give you a little primer. Governor Gavin Newsom signed Executive Order N82-20, which set a goal to protect 30% of California's lands and waters by 2030. It's shortened to 30 by 30. And it isn't just California's effort, it's a local, state, national, and international effort. The agency responsible for overseeing the implementation of 30 by 30 is the California Natural Resources Agency, or CNRA. There are 3 pillars to 30 by 30, which include biodiversity, access to nature, and climate resilience. CNRA released on Earth Day, April 22nd, last year, a document called Pathways to 30 by 30, which identified 10 different strategies on how we will achieve 30 by 30. And today, we're going to cover 3 of them. First is pathway number 1, which focuses on accelerating regionally led conservation. Second is pathway number 3, which highlights increasing voluntary conservation easements. And finally is pathway 4, which advances enhancing existing lands and coastal waters. We are grateful to have with us today 3 exceptional speakers, including Ann Deep, who joined the Ocean Protection Council, or OPC, in June of 2023. As one of OPC's 30 by 30 program managers, Ann leads OPC's community and tribal engagement priorities to help advance California's 30 by 30 goal in coastal waters. Ann received their PhD in quantitative systems biology from the University of California, Merced. Ann identifies as a queer first-generation scholar and immigrant. Next, we have Cameron Yee, who is the Operations and Research Director for the Central Coast Alliance United for a Sustainable Economy, or CAUSE. Cameron, him, grew up in Ventura County and graduated from UC Davis with a degree in environmental planning. His 20 years of experience with several community organizations, including CAUSE, range from advocating at the federal level for environmental justice to be analyzed in regional transportation plans, to impacting policies and projects on affordable housing, farm worker rights, and climate justice. And last but certainly not least is Kay Ogden, who for a decade has championed Eastern Sierra Land Trust, or ESLT, their conservation efforts and community engagement, resulting in the permanent protection of nearly 22,000 acres. And not only local, her commitment extends statewide as she holds the position of Vice Chair for the California Council of Land Trusts, CCLT, and as a member of CNRA's Partnership Coordinating Committee for California's ambitious 30 by 30 initiative. And beyond these conservation accomplishments, Kay embraces a more personal connection to nature. She spends her free time with her rescued German Shepherd in the high desert and crafting homegrown and made canned goods for friends and family, and apparently is well known for her delightful berry and bourbon jam, which I'm gonna have to taste at some point. So we are delighted to have these 3 presenters with us today. Each presentation will have about 12 minutes to cover their material, and then we will answer a few questions. And we encourage you to add your questions into the Q&A window so that we can track them there. We have scheduled plenty of time at the end for Q&A as well, so don't be disheartened if your question isn't answered immediately. So first up is Ann, walking us through 30 by 30 goals by the Ocean Protection Council. And they will also incorporate funding opportunities as well. Ann, please begin.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that introduction, Melanie. All right. Good morning, everybody. It's great to be here. My name is Ann Deep, and as Melanie says, I'm with Ocean Protection Council. I'm one of the 2 30 by 30 program managers, and I'm very excited to be here to talk to you all about Pathway 4, enhancing conservation of existing public lands and coastal waters. So to give you a brief introduction on OPC, we're a cabinet-level state body within the California Natural Resources Agency. And our mission is to protect California's coasts and ocean by advancing innovative science-based policy and management, making strategic investments, and catalyzing action through partnerships and collaboration. We are guided by our strategic priorities, which include efforts on climate change, equity, biodiversity, and a sustainable blue economy. You can read more about these priorities in the Ocean Protection Council Strategic Plan, but briefly, they are to safeguard coastal and marine ecosystems and communities in the face of climate change, to advance equity across ocean and coastal policies and actions, enhance coastal and marine biodiversity, and support ocean health through a sustainable blue economy. Melanie gave a great intro to 30 by 30, so this actually cuts down some work for me on the slide. But super briefly, OPC is super proud to be leading the state's efforts on advancing 30 by 30 within coastal waters specifically. So for the purposes of California's 30 by 30 goal, an area is considered conserved if it meets the following definition: land and coastal water areas that are durably protected and managed to sustain functional ecosystems, both intact and restored, and the diversity of life that they support, essentially showing positive outcomes for biodiversity. You can see that as I go through our approaches to advancing 30 by 30, they really build on Pathway 4. And this is because the ocean is a public good, unlike land, which can have both public and private owners and partners. So our approaches look towards enhancing and strengthening existing conservations. Not just that, but California's lands and coastal waters have exceptional biodiversity, and large areas of California are already underneath these conservations and protections. So it makes sense to strategically optimize and maximize their efficiency. So why enhancing conservation? It's the opportunity to improve existing protective measures using scientific evidence, which addresses not just evolving community needs, but also climate change resilience. So our four strategies, or our four approaches to advancing 30 by 30 in coastal waters, includes adaptively managing our state's MPA network, enhancing conservation within our national marine sanctuaries, supporting tribally led conservation, and exploring the role of other spatial management measures that exist beyond the current MPA and national marine sanctuary. So for the next part of this presentation, I will go a little bit more in depth on each of these four approaches and then give you all some exciting updates towards the end. So for our marine protected areas, the State Marine Protection Area Network, which covers 16% of state waters, already meets the definition of conserved, as MPAs were designed to safeguard ecosystem function and health, are durably protected, and have already shown positive outcomes for biodiversity. So adaptively managing California's MPA network will ensure that these areas continue to provide these strong protections for coastal and marine biodiversity, especially in the face of climate change. So the state has just completed the first decadal management review of the MPA network, which has resulted in a set of prioritized recommendations to guide adaptive management. These recommendations include actions related to MPA governance, management programs, and MPA network performance. Future changes to MPAs, that is boundary or regulatory changes, will occur through the management process, the adaptive management process. These changes would need to be science-based and community-driven, and they would be implemented by the California Fish and Game Commission and the California Department of Fish and Wildlife to better meet the goals of the Marine Life Protection Act. There is not a separate process to expand existing or create new MPAs to achieve 30 by 30 goals. So, next, for our national marine sanctuaries, California is home to 4 national marine sanctuaries, 3 of which cover almost 41% of our state waters. So they were established to conserve unique natural and cultural resources and include areas of exceptionally high biodiversity. And so while sanctuaries do provide important conservation benefits for marine life and habitat, each sanctuary has very different regulations and policies that will need to be assessed to determine whether they meet the pathway's definition of conserved. So, next. Tribal communities have been stewards of California's coastal resources since time immemorial, and the state has much to learn from their experience and traditional knowledge. So as outlined in our tribal engagement strategy, OPC is committed to actively engaging with tribes to ensure that our work benefits all Californians. Strengthening engagement with tribes means supporting coastal and ocean access for tribes to enhance connections to their ancestral lands and waters. It also means ensuring that tribal priorities, knowledges, and perspectives are respected, considered, and included in coastal and ocean policies. The creation and implementation of the Indigenous Marine Stewardship Areas, or IMSA, is a key component of California's 30 by 30 initiative in coastal waters. And last but not least, our other spatial management measures. So California's coastal waters includes a range of these management measures that exist beyond just the MPA or national marine sanctuaries. And these areas were created to protect things such as water quality or manage sustainable fisheries. So understanding the extent to which these and other spatial management measures are durable and provide biodiversity benefits that meet the definition of 30 by 30 is a top priority for Ocean Protection Council. However, the first step is to have a comprehensive inventory of these spatial management measures. So for some exciting progress to date, I'm going to go ahead and drop a link now. We just published our newsletter. Let me drop that in. All right. So you can go to that link right there and read more about these updates in depth, but super fast, just to give you some highlights regarding our MPA network. If you have any ideas on how California's MPA network could better protect biodiversity, strengthen climate change resilience, and provide more equitable access, members of the public can submit recommendations through a petition process with the Fish and Game Commission. So the petitions are open right now and are due to the Fish and Game Commission by November 30th. Instructions for submission can be found on the Commission's website, and I will drop that link soon. Next, for our national marine sanctuaries, this past summer, Ocean Protection Council has deepened its collaborations with the Greater Farallones Sanctuary and is actively engaging in its management plan update process. So this process provides an unprecedented opportunity to improve the conservation of the sanctuary's unique and fragile ecosystems, and options for strengthened protections will be presented to the public for input and discussion at the Sanctuary Advisory Council's public meeting this coming spring 2024. Additionally, in August, NOAA's Office of National Marine Sanctuaries released draft designation documents for the proposed Chumash Heritage National Marine Sanctuary. This proposed sanctuary would protect an ecologically significant area off of California's central coast and provide groundbreaking opportunities for tribal engagement and leadership in coastal and ocean management. So OPC is closely tracking the potential designation, and we really encourage members of the public to provide input during the public comment period, which is now open. So public comments on the draft designation documents are due by October 25th, and public comment meetings will be held both in person and online in late September to early October. Really recommend you all checking out the National Marine Sanctuary website for more information. And last but not least, for our spatial management measures inventory. So I mentioned earlier that OPC is developing a centralized inventory and map of spatial management measures in state waters. So to give you a high level overall, we're currently looking at water quality protection, fisheries management, habitat and species management, research and restoration, recreation and regulated access, and military use. And if you know of any additional spatial measures or management measures in California state waters that we should include in our analysis, we really want to hear your thoughts. So please comment on this list by emailing our email at 30by30coastalwaters@resources.ca.gov. And I'll go ahead and drop that email in a little bit too. And last but not least, the creation and implementation of Indigenous marine stewardship areas as outlined in the Pathway Strategy. OPC is in the early stages of developing policies to support this concept, and we really look forward to working in partnership with tribes to understand priorities on 30 by 30 and the tribal vision for IMSAs. And one final thing, over the last several months, with this new capacity of me and my fellow 30 by 30 program manager coming on board, we began to meet and connect with fellow community members. And we are doing this because we really want to hear your community concerns, hear your insights, and strengthen these connections, as well as strengthening existing avenues of communication. So if you're interested in talking with us, please email us to set up a meeting. OPC is also finalizing some exciting social media website updates to create a more accessible and easily navigatable website with information on relevant topics, upcoming meetings, and ways to get involved. And with that, let me go ahead and drop the link right here. Coastal waters. Sweet. Okay. And of course, funding opportunities. While right now we do not have current 30 by 30 specific funding, we do have solicitations that touch upon biodiversity and our strategic goals plans that are relevant and support 30 by 30. So you can go to our website, check out the solicitations page. Of course, you can also check out California Nature and check out the resources page as well, where you can find more funding opportunities. And of course, stay up to date. Sign up for our newsletter, follow us on social media, and keep in tune for these exciting updates on our website. And one final shout out, Ocean Protection Council staff will be at the 30 by 30 partnership gathering. So if you are there or planning on going, please come out, say hi. We'd love to connect with you and meet with you. And with that, I'll take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anne. I appreciate the background and context. A couple of questions have come in, but I want to start with a really basic one, because when folks think of conserving things, they mostly think of land. And that's why I'm delighted you are here today, because you're giving us a perspective that we don't normally get as it relates to water. What can you tell me about the different mechanisms that protect coastal waters? I heard you say marine protected areas. Can you kind of list out what some of those protected coastal water mechanisms are?
For sure, yeah. So we have our Marine Protected Area Network, which was established through the Marine Life Protection Act. And this is a way for specific special areas of high biodiversity or sensitive areas to be designated and protected with these regulatory measures. We also have our National Marine Sanctuaries, which is a federal designation as well. And these are also meant to kind of like highlight, protect, and preserve these areas of significant biodiversity and biocultural areas as well. And these already like cover large swaths of the state. So I mentioned that MPAs, as they exist right now, already cover approximately 16% of the state, and 3 out of the 4 national marine sanctuaries in California cover approximately 41% of state waters. And so it's essentially kind of like looking at these existing conservations and these existing protections and thinking about ways we can improve them and make them even better. Because I think up until having the 30 by 30 goal to really unite us all and to have this really robust definition for conservation and protection and what does it mean to be durably protected with positive outcomes for biodiversity, there wasn't this, I guess, standardization across the state that we were looking to unite. But now with this definition and with this kind of set goal, we can look towards kind of like seeing how we could partner with federal state agencies, with our local partners, with our tribes, to really make sure that we're all united on these different fronts to make sure that conservation is providing these positive outcomes and they're durable and sustainable.
Great, thank you for the context. There is what I'll call a time-sensitive question in the Q&A, and it's, what was the document that is open for public comment until October 25th? Can you remind us?
Yes. Sorry. So if you will go, and I can just drop the link one more time. On the OPC website, we just released our kind of like 30 by 30 update. And in this update, underneath the spatial inventory management, we kind of tease this little highlight of the spatial management measures that we're currently considering as part of this inventory. And so if you, as a local community member, know of these specific mechanisms or specific areas or management measures that you think, hey, this really should be part of a 30 by 30 analysis, here's a strong case for it, we really would love to hear that public input and feedback. And so we're requesting folks email us and contact us by October 25th so we can get all the information in.
Great, thank you for reiterating that. I'm sure we've got folks on on the webinar today that participate in a variety of commenting opportunities. So one more to add to the list. We have a question from Cindy in the chat about how the state views newly designated I'm not going to say this correctly, Tolowa and Yurok indigenous marine stewardship areas in relation to 30. So
For
kind
sure.
of a tribal component.
Totally. Yeah. OPC is super supportive of tribes exercising their sovereignty. And we're really looking forward to working with tribes to kind of like see how we can better support that designation and see how we could, essentially see how that designation fits within 30 by 30 and partner with tribes. So.
Great. And we'll do one more question. Cindy's got some great ones in here, so we'll get to some towards the end of the session. But another one to ask is, how is the inventory of spatial management measures different than what is already on protected seas? And there's a link, mpaprotectedseas.net.
For sure. Yeah. So for the spatial management measure, we're really looking to first kind of like create this list of basically just take inventory and stock of what all exists out there beyond MPAs and national marine sanctuaries. And then afterwards, this will go through a scientific working group process where it will be interrogated to really see how each of these different measures, how durable they are, and again, how what positive outcomes they show for biodiversity. So really making sure that they get robustly interrogated to meet this 30 by 30 definition, and then also putting it out for public comment. So that way there is a community aspect to make sure we are capturing all of California's insights. And we want to make sure that we capture regional insight as well. Because I think sometimes, as we all know, we stare at a giant map of California, things get lost in the details. So making sure that this inventory and making sure that we're being as inclusive as possible while making sure it's going through the public comment period. So that way everybody has a chance to contribute. And so we're still in the early stages of this, hence kind of like teasing what the inventory list is. But we're hoping to kind of like get started on that working group, scientific working group soon, and then putting it out for California to see. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time and energy on the presentation. We're going to go ahead and move over to Cameron Yee, who's from CAUSE, and he's going to tell us about his work in Ventura County, specifically improving coastal access at Ormond Beach. So Cameron, go ahead and take it away.
Good morning, everyone. My name's Cameron Yee, as Melanie said, and I'm with CAUSE, the Central Coast Alliance United for a Sustainable Economy. CAUSE is a base-building organization committed to social, economic, and environmental justice for working class and immigrant communities in California's Central Coast. We build grassroots power through community organizing, leadership development, coalition building, civic engagement, policy, research, and advocacy. CAUSE does our work in 5 main cities in Ventura and Santa Barbara counties. They are Santa Maria, Santa Barbara, Ventura, Oxnard, and Santa Paula. And in those cities, we organize on 3 key issues: affordable housing and renters' rights, building immigrant worker power, focusing on improving working conditions for farm workers. And what I'll be talking about today, environmental justice, specifically environmental justice in South Oxnard, and how we can accelerate regionally led conservation by involving the South Oxnard community in the restoration of the Ormond Beach wetlands. So I don't know if folks know where Oxnard is. It's a city of about 200,000 people on the coast of California in Ventura County. But specifically, I want to talk about South Oxnard. So who lives in South Oxnard? As you can see by the demographics listed, South Oxnard is really a community made up of immigrants, youth, and working families. However, since the 60s, this area was really used as a dumping ground for polluting industry. If you look at the map that's tucked in the middle of all the words, you can see a snapshot of the California Enviro screen. And at the bottom of that snapshot is the orange and red area. That is South Oxnard and where the Ormond Beach wetlands restoration is happening. In that bottom orange area, there's lots of industrial and other air pollution sources, including there's residents who live in that area face high levels of exposure to diesel exhaust. There's a Superfund site that was a former metal recycling plant that has a huge slag heap of all the waste that is created that still needs to be cleaned up. There's a operating power plant that just got extended. It was supposed to be retired this year, but it got extended another 3 years. There's a wastewater treatment plant and a paper mill. And there's also emissions from a lot of trucking that comes from the Port of Hueneme, which is just adjacent to that area. So where is the Ormond Beach restoration? If you can kind of imagine the previous map where the orange area was at the bottom, well, actually the Ormond Beach restoration is right in that red area. It is a 1,500 acre area composed of agricultural, industry, and wetlands. While industry has blocked access to the coast for the South Oxnard community, hundreds of acres of land are being transformed right now that can improve access to this open space asset. Over many years, tens of millions of dollars are being invested in cleaning up and restoring the area to its natural environment and opening up to public access. So here are some of the examples of industry that is currently actually on the Ormond Beach site. The top one, I believe that's a picture of the Halico slag heap. Again, it's all the toxic stuff they basically piled up in a giant mountain and capped it with some netting, and it still needs to be remediated. And it's been that way for the last 7 years. On the bottom left-hand corner, you see the Ormond Beach power plant. That is right on the coast of, and again, it just got extended, so it's going to keep running another 3 more years. The upper top right is the paper mill plant and the wastewater treatment plant at nighttime, showing some of the emissions. And the bottom is the fencing that is closing off the Halico Superfund site. So as you could see, there's a lot of industry that is actually separating the South Oxnard community from the coast. And that's where the opportunity is in involving the community in the Ormond Beach Restoration and Public Access Project, also known as OBREP. So basically this project was the California State Coastal Conservancy, the City of Oxnard, and the Nature Conserving coming together because they own a total of 630 acres that comprise the project area. And that project area extends along the Pacific, through residential commercial areas of South Oxnard, all the way to the naval base, Point Magoo. There's 2 underlying goals of OBREP. It's to preserve, enhance, and restore natural habitats and processes that support a dynamic and self-sustaining ecosystem at Ormond Beach. And it's to enhance opportunities for people to easily and safely visit Ormond Beach and enjoy the nature, educational opportunities, and recreation that are compatible with restored Ormond Beach ecosystem. So for years, CAUSE has worked to protect the Ormond Beach wetlands, recognizing it was important open space for the South Oxnard community. And the 3 partners involved knew that, and they involved us early on when they received funding for the project. They valued that CAUSE sought legitimate community input, and we wanted to be helpful in overcoming barriers for the South Oxnard community to participate in the restoration plan. So some of the barriers that are typical for community participation is that big meetings don't really work for normal people. There's a variety of reasons. One is language. There's multiple languages spoke from the South Oxnard community, from English, Spanish, indigenous language like Mixteco, Zapoteco. people's immigration status. It's an immigrant community. Sometimes people feel like they can't participate safely in a public meeting. There's a lot of technical information, as we know, with environmental projects and restorational projects. Someone has to translate that information into ways that people can understand it. There's also barriers of, it's hard for me to go and have the time to go to a big meeting, not knowing that I'm comfortable participating, and there's not necessarily childcare and I have to get there. So those are also additional barriers. And just in general, I don't know if anybody ever wore a headset and had things translated in a meeting, but it's really hard feeling out of place when you're wearing a headset to participate in a meeting with 100 people. And so we were involved to help by the partners to overcome this. And a big piece of it too was not only being able to interpret things and translate things into Spanish, but also Mixteco. And so big shout out, we also involved MICOP in that process to be part of our efforts to involve the community. So we really set up 3 things to do to involve the community. We set out doing a survey where we could directly get input from residents by going door to door to affordable housing complexes. Then we decided we'd also do 3 focus groups to further get down to the meat of how we could improve public access to the Ormond Beach wetlands. And then finally, we did things like beach cleanups and hikes on the property. So not only could we experience nature, but we could show people what the restoration was all about. So doing the survey, you could see at the bottom right-hand corner, that's how we go door to door and do surveys. We initially surveyed 300 people who lived in South Oxnard. And here's what we found. We already knew this, but most people never go to Ormond Beach. South Oxnard is about home to 70,000 people. Most people are within a 10-minute drive or less to get to Ormond Beach. But less than over half, or about half, mostly don't go because they don't know it exists or how to access it. Second, we found people mostly want easy, free activities like walking, picnicking, and relaxing on the beach at the Ormond Beach. Third, many people wanted options to get there by walking or biking, not just by car. And finally, people wanted places for family-friendly activities like picnic tables with benches or a playground for kids. After we did the survey, we worked with the city and the partners to develop focus groups, and we've targeted 3 groups: Spanish-speaking residents, Mixteco-speaking residents, and youth. And we did those 3 focus groups, and we compensated people for their time with a gift card. And we were able to get more in-depth findings, including most people wanted a more accessible entry point to the wetlands along a busy corridor, Wainimi Road. And that would require major pedestrian improvements because it's a very busy road with lots of trucks. People really wanted more amenities like benches, tables, and shade for places to rest along the paths, the proposed paths. And that people really wanted a more expansive role for a visitor center so it could have cultural and educational programming, including local Chumash tribe information and really part of the South Oxnard community. And finally, people wanted things like a children's facility with an Ormond Beach playground. So in addition, CAUSE has also conducted walks and trash cleanups to educate communities about the restoration and to have participants react to the maps of the planned restoration. CAUSE strongly believes our efforts have been successful in building the stewardship among the South Oxnard community for Ormond Beach, while also ensuring some of the concerns around gentrification displacement will be addressed as the project moves forward and improve some of the economic situation in South Oxnard. Again, I think public participation is generally thought of as having a big meeting and inviting people, but we think it's really important to be creative and use out of the box ways to involve the community. And so we think it's really vital that people partner with community organizations that work in the area, and that people's time really are used effectively by getting their input on the spot, like through a survey, instead of inviting them to a meeting that may be intimidating. And that focus groups can really go much deeper into people's thoughts, and people are more comfortable in these settings, especially when you can provide childcare and other amenities so they can fully participate. And so I think I will stop there.
Thank you, Cameron. That was really impressive in terms of your strategies for community engagement. It feels like the epitome of regionally led conservation. So I appreciate your hard work, and hopefully the next time I'm up in the Ventura area, I can visit South Oxnard and check out the beach myself. What can you tell me has been successful, or kind of lessons learned related to your community engagement? You said people aren't going to the beach and you've identified the barriers. How are you overcoming some of those through your strategies?
Yeah, I think partially part of our outreach and during the survey was like people found out that it existed, right? And that it is accessible, but just knowing, I think people knowing that they know that space patch of open space is there beyond the industry, and knowing that it's gonna be have really good public access. People are really excited about it. And, you know, more and more I've seen over the last 10 years, more organizations taking youth out to Ormond Beach and the wetlands, and people understanding that. So there's just that stewardship there now that really it's going to become a community asset as opposed to a hidden gem now. It's like people really want to use it. People love walking. People love being outdoors. And again, it's just those low impact things that people could do that they really want.
And it looks like you're utilizing folks that are friendly to interaction. So it's not a harsh, potentially intimidating setting, right? You're not, like you mentioned, the headphones and feeling out of place. This feels like meeting the community where they're at. Do you have recommendations for other folks in terms of identifying what community needs are and how to overcome those barriers? Like if they're just getting started, what should they think about?
Well, I always say it's like the best way to talk to people is just have a really simple survey on what you want to talk about, and go stand in front of a grocery store or active area and test it out and see if people even understand what you're saying, or take a map with questions. And if people don't understand that, then they're probably not going to come to your meeting either. And so it's like really just being out in the community, talking a really plain language. Things don't have to be as complicated as we tend to make them, or, you know, that's required of some documents, but we can all interpret that into a way that's really understandable, where it's like, okay, restoring the Ormond Beach wetlands is a really important step to help with climate resilience, because it provides a buffer zone when sea level rises, and that's what the wetlands do. But we also have access to it because we are developing a plan that is gonna have paths and different spots and educational spots. So it's a really great project. So really just talking to people in a plain language and getting out and talking to people. Don't expect them to come to you.
So the key nugget for that in my interpretation of what you said is avoid the policy wonk and make sure it's understandable language, that folks get the basics. And moving over to the basics, it sounds like there's a lot of different ownerships. Have you quantified how many different landowners are involved in that particular beach environment?
So the actual, like TNC, Nature Conservancy owns I think I can't remember the exact amount, but owns about 1/3 of the 1,600 acres, and that's going to be restored. Okay. And there's a process now where hopefully when it's restored, it'll be handed over to Fish and Wildlife. Like that's the hope to run it. The other stuff is all for negotiation. So Halico is still, the Superfund site is still privately owned. The power plant is still owned by that company, and they say they could leave it up and just like not do anything with it when it's decommissioned. Like there's no promises in it, anything. So that's all, you know, in the works. There's several sites that have been, there's a site that was identified a long time ago, about 10 years ago, as a gateway park, and that's still someone else owns it. So there's a lot of players involved, and the vision is for having the most possible area set aside and restored as open space, but that still remains to be seen.
And the more owners you have, the more complicated it is. What about how the agencies you're working with, are they receptive to your involvement and community engagement, or have you identified any challenges on that front?
No, again, the California Coastal Conservancy, the City of Oxnard, and the Nature Conservancy have reached out to us early. They involved us. You know, we're a sub-grantee for the OB-RAP to do this outreach, so they wanted us involved right away. CAUSE also works with the Nature Conservancy on access to the Santa Clara River, and they're restoring a project there called the Hansen property, and CAUSE was involved there. We did surveys, we did hikes there, and to get input. And so we're really excited. That actually is supposed to be open, I think, at the beginning of next year. So all that work in terms of getting the community involved, we get to celebrate the beginning of next year. So definitely agencies are very receptive. They want people involved. They, you know, they know South Oxnard has long been neglected, and that, you know, improved access to open space for the community will be a benefit for all.
I think I missed the fact that you were a sub-grantee. I apologize for that. So clearly you've got a significant role in that, and I can't wait to get back to asking some questions at the end of the presentation, but we're going to go ahead and move on to our next presentation, which is strategy number 3, or pathway number 3, which is K from the Eastern Sierra Land Trust. And I can't wait to hear about kind of conservation easements 101 and how you're tying in the tribal component as well. So Kay, go ahead and get started.
Okay, thank you so much for the invitation, Melanie, to be here. I really appreciate being a part of this important series that you're doing for everybody. Through CNRA's 30 by 30 pathways document, the state does recognize that conserving private lands through conservation easements is a well-established and highly effective way to achieve environmental conservation, and it's an important step to accomplish the ambitious, as we all know, 30 by 30 initiative. Across California, conservation easements do help maintain lands for open space, wildlife, ecological functions, responsible resource production, scenic enjoyment, and recreation. They're complex, they can take years, and additional support in terms of funding, collaboration, and processes from the state are critical if we're going to meet these goals. I just want to tell you a little bit about Eastern Sierra Land Trust, which is the organization I help lead. We're a nonprofit. We're 22 years old. We now have 23,000 acres protected. We closed on our first project in Nevada, the state of Nevada, just last week. ESLT is also an accredited land trust, which means we've gone through an incredibly rigorous process to be accredited, and means we uphold rigorous processes. We're the top. We're not saying, ESLT, an accredited land trust, are the top of the top, and it really helps build trust with our landowners. ESLT works in Mono, Alpine, and Inyo counties in Western Nevada, and we only work with conservation easements that are in perpetuity. Some organizations work in shorter term. We're only in perpetuity. We also work in the Numu Northern Paiute land, which includes the federally unrecognized Mono Lake Cutsetica tribe, and we are currently partnering on 2 land back projects. So we're very excited about that work. Conservation easements are a legal and binding tool that protects specific conservation values on each property. They define permitted and not permitted uses, Mostly they limit development. The land is owned by the landowner and can be sold, but the conservation easement is permanently attached to the title of the property. So when it transfers ownership hands, the easement is attached to title and it goes with the land. We basically purchase at fair market value through a complex process the development rights from the landowner, and then we extinguish those development rights through escrow. ESLT closed on a 4,100 acre conservation easement a couple years ago on working and natural lands, and we extinguished 80 development rights. So had the easement not been there, the landowner, according to the general plan of the county, could have subdivided that ranch and put 80 homes on it. So each conservation easement is very specific to the land it is over. That's how we call it. The land is there and the easement is over the land. And it spells out which species are being protected. Water rights can be called out, and the general uses of, if it's a working cattle ranch, there might be an area that allows infrastructure to be built in terms of supporting the working ranch, but it's not, might not be permitted to build 4 homes for the family, but maybe there's 1 home that's been spelled out that could be put in a specific place. These conservation easements can take years to complete, depending on how quickly funding can be acquired, how quickly all the parties, the landowner, the land trust, or the RCD, or the community organization, are working with the funders. So everybody needs to agree to all of the terms that are in the conservation easement, and then it has to get reviewed and approved by the funders. It needs to be appraised by an approved appraiser, and everybody needs to agree to that the appraisal, and all of the conservation easement terms. The terms are legally enforceable, and some have the language in the actual CE. Others have a management plan to help uphold the conservation values. Accredited land trusts have a responsibility to monitor each project at least once a year to see hands-on what's happening on the land and to make sure that the conservation values are being upheld. CNRA, through the 30 by 30 initiative, identified 9 strategies to help grow voluntary private land conservation programs. If we're going to increase conservation easements to accomplish 30 by 30 goals, we need different pathways. Oh, that was a slip. We need different strategies to help us meet the important goal. And that's what's laid out in the next steps in the Pathways 3. So one is building capacity. And we need capacity to help build capacity. It's a pretty tough thing right now if we're going to be, with all this new funding that's coming down and all of the new ways that we can work with private lands, we need capacity to do it. We both, we need the funding and we need the people and we need grant writers and we need all kinds of things. So the state is now building into their grant funding, which they did not in the past, capacity. So recently, Department of Conservation had a capacity grant, and the state is working with a lot of the funders now to put capacity into the new grant programs. That way we can hire new staff to help us accomplish these goals. There's also an integration of climate benefits. So the CNRA team and Secretary Crowfoot are really looking at how we can include climate benefits into the biodiversity benefits. So often conservation easements are based just in biodiversity or ecosystem-based conservation realm. So now if we can build in climate change benefits, that's one of the things that we're working on how to do through the grant programs. And again, for access, similar to the previous effort, private lands can sometimes be difficult to have private access. But when there can be private access, the state's helping us work to how to identify those places where it's appropriate and how we can build in public access on private land where it's appropriate. It's not for everyone. They're also, obviously, I think, as we all know, it's a huge part of 30 by 30 is to work with our Native communities and to have greater tribal engagement. It's an area that's really been called out to for greater work. So it's not the same people at the same table doing the same work. It's an opportunity to be creative and open and look at new ways of protecting land with our tribal partners. Now, this can be awkward and challenging at times because they're sovereign nations. And some of the past terms of the grant fundings really didn't feel like we were stepping into a partnership. Some of the requirements for tribes, either on fee title or even with conservation easements, that they had to partner in different ways with different entities. So the state is looking at that and looking at that's an extra burden. That's an extra, I don't know, I'll just say maybe yucky thing. And so how can we, or how can the state work to meet their goals of protection, but do it in a more respectful way? And so certainly through, and thank you for putting that link up there, the new tribal-based nature solutions program, how they're working in getting those restrictions in, it's in the grant deed. It's not, they don't have to have an extra conservation easement or extra monitoring plans. It's in the deed, which is a much better place for that. So they've also, the state is trying to look, oh, I'm sorry, I messed up some slides here. The state is also knowing that it takes forever to do these darn conservation easements, and some of it are processes and some are other aspects. So they're trying to get the state and the feds to work so on the federal parts and the state part with programs and funding and templates to come up with some common templates that will, and processes that will help facilitate the work, hopefully make it less burdensome and less timely. Also, the idea of where the states are, I mean, where conservation easements are within the state has not always been equal. So the state is looking at geographic distribution. They're working on this. They haven't had a chance to do a deep dive yet, but they're working on it. They also heard from RCDs and land trusts and other community entities that there needed to be block grants or re-granting programs because that lessens the burden on smaller entities to access funding. So in the past, there really hasn't been a good system of getting out block grants. Block grants are maybe a larger organization applies for it, and then they can break it down and do re-granting. Just recently, WCB put in some new grants that had about, I can't remember, but went to RCD, and then CCLT, California Council of Land Trusts, we have 2 block grants put in right now that we're hoping to get that can help lift all size of conservation organizations throughout the state to access these important funds. And there's also, they're working on some incentives. There may be the case where landowners need to fallow their land either voluntarily or for another reason. So they're looking in ways to include these conservation opportunities into some new programs. They're also looking to improve practices for sustainability, such as how can we incorporate pollinators, things like that into conservation easements, besides just looking at best practices for biodiversity. It's a super exciting time. I'm thrilled to be a part of 30 by 30. There's new funding, new solutions, new support, and it's a time to really step into conservation in a broad scale. Thank you.
Thank you. Great information. And I'm going to be very honest. Conservation easements aren't used as widely in Orange County. And so this was incredibly helpful in terms of setting some context. But I want to drill down on a little bit of some of the basics that I think might be relevant to those attending today. What's the difference in cost to do a conservation, to purchase the development rights and implement a conservation easement versus getting fee title for a property?
So let me go, let me give a broad, exaggerated, extreme example of how you get the a price for a conservation easement. So a qualified appraiser will go in and look at the land. Let me use a working landscape, a cattle ranch as an example. So they go in and they see, okay, is this a peak cattle ranch or is this a part of an active business? Are the ranching operations built in, you know, the structure there to help? Are there roads? Can you get there year round? Or is there electricity? So I don't know if you see my hand. So they go in and they do that basic on the ground appraisal. And that could probably be the same appraisal for fee title, right? So they're going in and they're looking at what's there on the ground, what it's being used for, if there's water rights, all of that kind of stuff. Now for a CE, their next step is to then go to the county and review the general plan and see, okay, on that property we're talking about, if it were to be built out per county plans, what's that value? So you've got the original value of the assessment of what's there now. The appraisers go in and look at what could happen if it was built out. And that, gross exaggeration, right? But generally speaking, that's the development rights. And so that's the price of the conservation easement that we have to fund for. Did that make sense?
Absolutely. So a lot of the same research is done for the appraisal. It's just an added step of understanding development potential and doing some, I'll call it fancy math.
Yes. Yes. And, you know, and again, each property is so different. So there's different things that are looked at. So it's quite complex, but in general terms, I think that's accurate.
Great. I'm curious if in working with the agencies, there's a set template that you always use for the easement language, or is it really property specific?
Both. So each funder has a template that they prefer. And so often on a project, you might have 3 funders, plus you've got the landowner, plus you have the entity, say in this case, ESLT. So what we have to do is take the templates from all 3 funders and put them together and then make sure the landowner's okay with it. And oh, by the way, is it still upholding the mission and values ESLT? So it can be quite complex. And that is one of the things that the state is working on right now, is to work with the federal funding agents. Can there be a common template that just has room for some specification per property, but that the general grant terms are common and we don't have to do all this putting all the pieces together to make a big puzzle?
Sounds complicated, as all transactions seem to be. We do have a question from Garrett about WCB doing block grants again. Can you speak to that at all? And I will, just as a side note, encourage Garrett and others to participate in next month's workshop, which I'll talk about in a moment, where WCB will be present. And so that'll be a great question to ask them directly, but give us your experience with block grants.
It's new with WCB. I think in the work that we're doing with them through CCLT, they've told us it's just, you know, it's a great idea, but they don't have the system set up. But they did do one to California Resource Conservation District, I think about 2 or 3 months ago. I am not very familiar with exactly that re-granting program. We can look at, and I can definitely find out more if people are interested in, and get links out to everybody. CCLT does have a grant. We're working on a grant proposal with WCB right now for land trusts and RCDs. We're fine-tuning the proposal. Will probably be on the February or January meeting. We're not going to make the November meeting, but it will be a way to streamline getting money out to land trusts and I believe RCDs to access that money for fee title as well as conservation easements. It's coming.
Great. So stay tuned and watch for examples.
And I will say as well, CCLT also, excuse me, put in a proposal to Department of Conservation for another block grant. And we are on pins and needles right now. I think anybody who applied for that funding, we were supposed to hear 2-3 weeks ago. So we're still waiting, but that's another opportunity, and that will be grant funds as well that will come through CCLT.
And do you need to be a land trust or B, a member of CCLT to tap into that block grant that you would have received, hopefully?
You need to be a land trust, but you do not need to be a member of CCLT.
And do you need to be an accredited land trust?
I don't know. I don't think so. I'm not sure.
Right.
Let me find that out.
All right, we will wait with bated breath, and we can always email folks if they're interested. So I'm going to wrap up the PowerPoint slides, and then we'll finish up with a round of questions for each of the speakers. So thank you to all three of you. You did an amazing job. Appreciate the context and the information today. So again, we're going to focus on questions. Please add those questions into the Q&A and we will get to those. And then I do want to mention that this is the 6th workshop in an 8-part series of webinars being put on by FHBP. And each month on the 4th Thursday from 10 to 11:30, with the exception of November, where it will be the 5th Thursday, we will feature content related to 30 by 30 and helping you and your organization achieve your goals in alignment with the state's efforts. So our October 26th workshop focuses on capacity building for projects, people, and community. So if you're able to, take out your phone, scan the QR code with your camera, you can click the link to register for this next event. And the link will also be added into the chat by Geo. We do have speakers from the Wildlife Conservation Board, Conservation Impact, and Hispanic Access Foundation. So we hope to see you there. And if you want to be notified about future workshops, you can email us at community@fhbp.org. Just include your name and your email address, and we will add you to our email list. But you need to basically provide your express permission in order to be added, because we don't want to be deemed a spammer. To stay informed about 30 by 30 through the state, I'm also going to encourage you to sign up for the CNRA 30 by 30 email list. And we've created short bit.ly links for you to do that. CNRA provides content related to webinars, grants, programs, public comment periods, etc. And as Anne mentioned during the first presentation, there's an event coming up, October 11th and 12th. The last day to register for that is October 2nd, which is Monday. Hard to believe. So let me say thank you to everyone. I'm going to stop the sharing. Perfect. Now I can see you all really clearly, and we're going to go ahead and start with some of the questions that are in the Q&A. And I'm going to start with you first. Does the state consider, and this question I should say is from Cindy, does the state consider a state water quality protection area of special biological significance to have the primary purpose to be other than affording special protection for marine life through improved water quality, as stated in the original adopted State Water Resources Control Board Resolution 74-28. I'm going to admit I don't quite understand that question. Hopefully you do, and maybe you can rephrase it for some of us that are less familiar with some of these terms, and then answer it.
For sure. Yeah, it's a great question. So management and regulatory measures were created over time and at different spatial locations for a variety of different reasons. And so how those areas actually provide the protections for the time and spatial coverage as needed to meet the 30 by 30 definition will be evaluated using criteria developed by the working group I mentioned earlier. So I guess this is my way of saying we will find out. And we really look forward to like sharing those results in 2024 when we have that robust working group process and then going through the public comment process. So I hope that answers the question. If not, feel free to email me. Happy to follow up and chat offline.
Great, thank you. And Kay, I think you mentioned you may have an answer to my earlier question.
I did. I was able to reach out while there was the little break there for me, and the WCB block grant I believe both grants are going to be open to any land trust. They do not need to be accredited, and they do not need to be members.
Great. So that provides probably a few more opportunities then for
Exactly.
folks. So Cameron, back over to South Oxnard and Ventura. I'm curious if because you found so much success with the community outreach there, do you have other projects where you're replicating this approach that we can hear a little bit about?
That's a good question, Beldy. So for us, that's doing what this process of evolving the community in such a detailed way is not necessarily the number one thing we do. So we certainly are invested in improving public access to places like Ormond Beach that are right there in the community. Same with the Santa Clara River in Ventura County. That sometimes we get asked to do other things and like this in terms of, oh, will you help us do a survey? Will you help us turn out people for a meeting? And we have to be selective because our primary goal is to really do the three things I said, which is increase the amount of affordable housing and protect renters' rights, and to really improve working conditions for immigrant workers, but really farm workers, and environmental justice. And so sometimes it's challenging for us to do that because that can make us drift away from our mission. But we are happy to share with people our techniques and really, link people to other people and communities depending.
That's great. Thanks for the offer. I'll do a quick follow-up question then, since you brought up something that's near and dear to my heart. I'm a huge fan of training other people so that you don't have to start from scratch. Have you developed toolkits on what you found successful for outreaching to the community, or a fact sheet or lessons learned?
We don't have anything specific. We do organizer trainings, which sometimes doing outreach to the community is a lot like being an organizer. And yeah, it's not rocket science. Again, it's just like being out in the community and talking to people and being accessible and really listening to people, and then being able to track and record that information, I think, are really the key aspects to good public outreach and meaningful outreach.
Great, thank you. Super excited about that organizer training, but other groups I know may be interested in that. We'll pop back over to Kay. There's a question specifically from Virginia about the block grants. Clearly this is popular. Are the proposed CCLT block grants geographically or habitat specific?
No. And once we get the funds, you know, some of those, the grant funding program is going to be defined. But the goal of this is to have wide range representation throughout the state of California, and all the different ways that conservation easements can support 30 by 30. So not just, do you have bi-state sage grouse, or do you have, you know, I don't know, something else in another place? So it will be broad, because the goal of these is to lift everybody's vote up in order to accomplish 30 by 30.
Thank you. That's great information. And do you have a time frame on that? When you know, you're supposed to hear 2 to 3 weeks ago, I get it, but how quickly will you be able to then disperse the funding to folks? And is there an application process?
There will be an application process. We are working right now. We are hoping, okay, if the DOC, when we get the DOC funding any day now, we hope to be able to have that ready to go by February, March, or April. So it's a short term to expend the funds and report back. So our goal is to get this out quickly, and we're kind of working in the background on what that might look like already. And on the WCB, that's obviously going to be a little bit farther out, because we'll be applying for that funding in, they may have a different meeting, but right now it looks like the February meeting. And so if we get funded there, then it would be maybe another 3 to 4 or 5 months. We push that out. So it's soon. We want to get this rolling soon.
Great. I love talking about money, which is why I'm heading that way with you, Anne. Let's talk money. So OPC has grants. Can you tell us how much money is available in this year's budget? Is how far inland, or is it literally just the beach and into the water? Kind of what are some of the specifics folks may need to know about as it relates to money from OPC?
Yeah, for sure. So like I said earlier, if you go to our OPC website and go to the solicitations, underneath the solicitations, it'll show you what the current open projects are, and therefore what the limitations or what they are looking to fund. So for example, right now, looking at this, it looks like we have our accelerating kelp research and restoration in California, offshore wind monitoring guidance, and etc. I'll have to get back to you on the specific funding amounts, but yeah, all the information that you can find is currently on our solicitation page.
Great, thank you. And I'm just going to say, we do have a question in the Q&A. Can each speaker please post the best way to follow up with each of them? So if you can add that into the chat, that would be great. And if not, we can capture that a different way. I do see, Kay, you're typing into it. As soon as you're done typing, it's going to end the question. So drop it in the chat and make sure you select everyone if that's an option, so that everyone can see it, not just the host and panelists. But let's see, is it not available to, oops, you're muted.
I messed up the 30 by live, so I'm just going to put the live one, answer live. I'm just going to put it in the chat. I apologize.
That's okay. So folks can do that. And Kay, you're next up on the question list here. So pause for a moment.
Okay.
The question from somebody in the audience is, would fee simple acquisition not be as effective as a conservation easement? And is it usually agencies who use fee simple acquisition to acquire the public lands for conservation? So this person is not sure if they understand the process well.
Okay. I think fee acquisition and conservation easements can both be just as effective. It's landowner wishes, right? Sometimes a landowner doesn't want to sell their land, but they want a conservation outcome. So a conservation easement is a way to help them retain ownership and get some funding now, and help build in conservation practices to their property. Sometimes a landowner wants to sell, and in that case, then an entity can purchase that land, and it doesn't have to just be state agencies. Many land trusts also own fee title or property in fee title that we then put our own restrictions on. So it's really what tool is best for the outcomes that the partnership wants, and then matching that up with funding.
Great, that makes sense. Cameron, I'm heading over to you next. The question for you is about the timing as it relates to the plan creation, an approval process. So would you expect the restoration plan to be finished in the next couple years? And then when would people actually get access to some of these great locations? Do you have an ETA on that?
Pandemic, the survey that we did and the focus group all happened before the pandemic. So the process has been delayed some. I don't know exactly the new timeline. I can put a link to the actual plan. Again, as a subcontractor, we're not involved in the nitty-gritty of it, just fulfilling our certain aspects of the application and the proposal. But yeah, I think I forget, it's the 70% plan is done, and so yeah, I am not sure, but let me find that link so I can share it in the chat.
Great, thank you, I appreciate that. So Anne, I'm heading back over to you. Because coastal waters is so different than like what we heard from Kay today, the salty side of things, is it just designations that then qualify as 30 by 30 coastal water acreages? Or is there anything to purchase?
Sorry, do you mind repeating the last part again? To purchase?
Yeah, so the question is, when counting coastal waters in 30 by 30, is it simply designations through marine sanctuaries or MPAs versus are you actually purchasing something? Because you can't really buy the ocean.
For sure, for sure. No, it's not just MPAs, it's not just national marine sanctuaries. It's why we are investing time and energy into the other spatial management measures. It's really to make sure that so conversely, to make a parallel on the land side, land's looking at complementary conservation measures that kind of enhance biodiversity protections or have added biodiversity protections to conserve areas. So in the watery side, we're looking at these other spatial management measures, and these management measures, as we know, can overlap with each other. And so if there's overlap, does this provide further protection, more robustness, and et cetera? So this is all kind of part of that working group assessment that we're talking about, first inventorying to make sure we know what all exists out there and what their benefits are and what do they regulate, and then really sitting down, looking at how they layer, how they interact, going through the working group process to really assess that scientifically and robustly, and then finally, again, going out for that community comment period to make sure we're capturing the full breadth and scale of everything. So that is to make sure that we're capturing not what exists beyond the MPA and National Marine Sanctuary Network.
And how many MPAs are there in the state of California?
That's a great question. I should probably know this. I know it covers 16.2% of the state waters. I can't give you an exact number.
All right, no worries. It just popped into my head and I thought, oh, that's interesting. So I'm going to head back over to Kay and ask, you mentioned grazing, and I'm curious, as it relates to the Bureau of Land Management, BLM, who you may or may not partner with, and there are grazing rights on lands. Have you ever extinguished grazing rights? Is that something you do through your land trust? And if so, what are things we should know about that? Because then those lands, because they don't have an extractive use on them, could probably then qualify for 30 by 30 acreages?
Great question. So ESLT does partner with BLM, but we focus our work on private lands. We often will purchase the land and then transfer it to BLM with some protections on it, but we don't work directly with BLM with grazing allotments and things like that. We work with private landowners who may have grazing allotments on public lands, but we do not work in extinguishing grazing allotments or grazing issues. Now, if it's a conservation easement and it has current grazing on it, and maybe it's been overgrazed, that will be a part of a management plan to bring up the conservation values, but we may or may not, like, never have grazing on the property again. Sometimes grazing, well done, well managed grazing can be an effective tool to uphold conservation values.
Great, thank you. And I'm going to head back over to Cameron for probably one question, and depending on how long your answer is, I may pop back over to Anne. We'll see before wrapping it up, since we just have a couple minutes. I'm curious if in your surveys you're incorporating the requests from the public on what they want to see at the beach, like picnic tables, trails, interpretive displays. Does it go into that level of detail, and then also that then prompts another series of somethings, like the Coastal Commission would need to be involved if you're adding a restroom kind of thing?
So all those ideas that were very popular that you mentioned are being incorporated into the plan as I believe they're all in the preferred alternative. So
Okay,
because it was done before the initial draft of the plan that was just released last November. So it came from the survey, and then we got more in depth when we talked about it in the focus groups, what that meant exactly, like interpretive signage, thing like that. And then, yes, that is being incorporated. The same thing happened too with the Hanson property in the Santa Clara River that's going to open near Santa Paula. There's going to be interpretive signage and things like that, and places to sit, again, at the community's request. So it would improve public access, especially for those communities who nearby who haven't had access to places like Ormond Beach or the Santa Clara River in the past.
and it sounds like pretty passive access as opposed to recreation, like soccer fields, right?
Right, and that was, there's a lack of soccer fields in South Oxnard, so that is always, some people do request that, but obviously that is not compatible with the restoration in terms of use. So it's noted, but yeah, that is not a low impact use.
That's right. That's right. Great. All right. So Anne, very quickly, if you had to identify one way that OPC is shifting its priorities because of 30 by 30, what would that be?
Ooh, I don't know if I'm the right person to answer that, since I came on board 3 months ago. I also, prior to this job, I was a fellow at CNRA for the land side of 30 by 30. So I've been in it. I've just been in it from the start. But what I will say with this time is that, we're really honored and so excited to be leading these efforts for 30 by 30 in coastal waters, meeting the community of folks, interacting with folks today and having these questions. It just gives me so much hope for the future, given the fact that there's people who care, there's people who are passionate, and people who want to make this place in our home a better place and preserve this for future generations. So quick little shtick for that, and just to say, really excited to be here. Yeah.
Great, thank you. So wrapping up for today, again, a shout out to all three of the presenters. Fantastic information. Appreciate the time and energy. To our participants, thank you for joining us today. There will be a survey that's emailed out through Zoom, so please fill it out so we have a better understanding of how we did, what we can do better, what we did well, and we will be sending it via email as well in case Zoom somehow malfunctions and doesn't take you there automatically. Thank you again. Hope to see all of you in October and have a great rest of your day. Thank you.